Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Seddon and Lacey's Comic Stash. That's Seddon, I'm Lacey, and we're part of the Renaissance Men. And we are here basically in this first episode to go through our histories with comics and how we got into it. Basically, this will be a show that we will do episodes about runs of comics, favorite comics, where to start with, things like that. And it is the brainchild of Mr. Seddon, who dropped the hint that he wanted to do something comic-y, and then I went, dude, let's do it. So here we are.
If that doesn't strike fear into the hearts of anyone watching or listening, I don't know what will. I mean, like it's strange because you sort of say about it, and I was joking before we went on about this. This is almost our origin, isn't it? This is akin to our superhero origin of how we got to where we are now with comic books, and also we thought this would be a good place to start because you, the audience, will get to know us along the way, and hopefully get to know and love us like the lovable rogues that we are. But for us, I mean, Chris and I, we've been chatting on Messenger. This sounds like we've been doing some sort of weird dating site thing, doesn't it? But for us, this is a bit of a getting to know each other on this as well. Like, we know we have some shared interests and some shared hobbies, but this is a chance for us to learn about each other and how we got to where we are today.
Exactly. Just a quick one for me, because obviously we all know who Seddon is. It's weird. I'm on the wrong side of the camera. It should be that side.
Yeah, my bad. I'm sure I could do some switching, but technical.
You may know me from wrestling 20 years ago. That's been going since 8 years now, and I've been on there for pretty much 7 years talking wrestling. And also I used to do a music show called Show and Tell with Tunes. Damn copyright strikes, which has killed that. And other bits and pieces. I turn up on random people's podcasts because I can. So that's
so you started with wrestling 20 years ago when you were 10. Oh, excuse that unprofessional phone call going off in the background. Speaking of copyright strikes.
Basically we started wrestling 20 years ago in 90. We started for the year 93, so it'd been 2013, and I came in it in the sort of middle of 94, so 2014, and I've been on there ever since, reminiscing about when wrestling was
not shit,
sort of good.
yeah. Well, you never know. I mean, as I say, we are going to focus primarily on comic books, superheroes, and the other side of comic books, like the non-superhero stuff. But I'm sure along the way we can't help ourselves. We'll probably dabble 1 foot or 2 foot into wrestling every now and again as well. Won't we?
Well, when we go into our origins with it, mine will come back. That's a little sneak for later. But as I've been talking loads, where did it all start for you?
Well, I don't know. I think my view into the comic book world started probably as a lot of people did my age, which was not with comic books. Mine started with the Batman TV show. And when I say the Batman TV show, for those that aren't as old as me, that Batman TV show. So the Adam West TV show, I grew up on it as a kid. I want to say it was always on, but I think it was just the lack of channels, and my memory kind of searches back to that. But that was probably my first big introduction to the concept of costumed superheroes. And not a million miles after that, I think seeing the Richard Donner Superman, which I think we probably will pick up on a little bit further. We probably will at a certain point maybe do an episode on movies and how that's kind of changed the comic book world. But that made me realise that there were these colourful characters out there, and these colourful characters that were good guys that fought bad guys. And I got very, very interested. But I've got to be honest, at that stage, I didn't really know that comics existed. The only comics I'd experienced were things like the Beano, the Dandy, Whizzer and Chips was the big one for me. I don't know why I kind of resonated with that one, but yeah, my main knowledge of comic books or serialized art was those comic books and probably Asterix and Obelix books and Tintin books, because I had them in the local library, and my local shop only sold, as I say, Beano, Dandy, and things like that. Where was your initial step into this crazy world?
So for superheroes, mine too is 66 Batman, Channel 4. I think it was like every Sunday.
Yeah,
It used to be on, and then at one point it was on every weekday, sort of 3:30, 4. I should get home from school, and it was on. And it wasn't until the animated series in the early 90s, which I then went, hang on, a cartoon Batman. And then that was when I think my local corner shop started having the Batman comics in. But like you, my initial thing of comics was Beano and Dandy. Going to my grand's every Saturday, I'd go and help her do her shopping, and my treat was a Mars bar, a Dandy, or the Beano, whichever one they had left,
yeah,
and a can of Coke. Living the early 90s dream. So yeah, that, and then you sort of saying about the colourful thing, does cross back to wrestling, because obviously I got into wrestling 89, so like the Warrior and like the bright sparkling colours and stuff. So I think that did sort of go, ooh, like real life superheroes, when you saw things like Batman and stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later that you then sort of get a more like the darker side and everything else. But obviously when you're young, you just see the vibrant colours and the fun stuff. But yeah, same as you, like Asterix and Obelix as well. Used to always be in the school libraries, we'd read those. And the WCW comic book from 1993. That was a thing, because obviously WCW used to be on like ITV at fucking 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So you had to be determined to get it.
I need to hunt this down. I did not know that there was a WCW comic. I mean, I know, like, obviously we've had wrestling comics through the years post that, but I didn't know there was one going back to then.
So basically, obviously the Fed had the Fed magazine.
Yeah.
Because I used to get that religiously.
Oh, God, yes, yeah.
And the WCW magazine, the front of it looked like a bit like that. It wasn't until you opened it up and it was a comic. And I was just like, I can get behind this. And the thing was, because a lot of the guys were people that were never shown on Worldwide, I had no idea who most of them were. So I didn't know if they were real wrestlers or made up comic book people. Because obviously on our telly, you'd get Johnny B. Bad, or you'd get Brian or someone like that. So they'd be in them, but they'd be like Cactus Jack, who you'd never see on telly.
No.
But was in this, and Vader and Sting. And it was like, is this some sort of crossover between, comic book fiction and wrestling? And it wasn't until obviously later that you then got to see proper WCW. No, these guys were wrestlers.
Yeah.
But yeah, that WCW comic, I only think it lasted for about 8 or 9 months.
Probably you were the only one getting it, mate. That's why no one else knew it existed.
But yeah, no, that was the thing. And I'm pretty sure there's someone, I think it's WCW Worldwide on Twitter, has got a couple of issues that he's scanned and put online.
Oh, see, that's post show. I'm going to hunt them down.
But yeah, no, that was where one of my first big crossovers of my two interests.
Well, I think that's one of the hopes for this as well, isn't it? As we go through this, because I think we've got sort of slightly different paths and slightly different interests, and I think the hope is as we talk about it, we'll kind of introduce each other to stuff that maybe we haven't read before that we might find of interest, and also the hope is that people watching this will recommend stuff to us. But there you go, straight away, something I didn't even know existed that has piqued my interest. Funny when you were saying about like we both had that origin in Dandy, Beanos, etc. That was actually the thing that kind of transitioned me into my first understanding that there were superhero comics. So I guess probably like me, you would get the annuals at Christmas. There'd be the big like kind of Beano Dandy annual, or again for me, Whizzer and Chips. But one year, and I don't really know why, but rather than getting those, my mum, and I'm going to guess it was my mum that bought it might have been my dad, but bought one for my brother and one for me, and it wasn't one of those. They were Marvel ones, and they were Marvel reprint, much like a lot of the British comics were, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But his was a Spider-Man one, and I don't really remember much about that one. I guess because it was his, so I didn't spend inordinate amounts of time reading it. But mine was a random issue of Avengers where they fought the Defenders. Now, I didn't know who the Avengers were or the Defenders were going into this. My only understanding of the Avengers was that there was a British TV show called The Avengers, and I could tell very quickly that these weren't it. But I just, again, because it was the only thing I had, I read that over and over and over and over again. And I knew a lot about a very specific story for those characters. But that kind of told me that actually there's stuff out there, but I still didn't really know how to get hold of it. I didn't really know an outlet for it. And it wasn't that long after that. And again, I think because of the weekly serialized comics that they did in Britain, all of a sudden, some reprint weekly editions started to appear in my local newsagents. And that was the birth of me understanding that comics existed. But again, it was still a very, very narrow world of what comics were. So I was getting like probably half of a story each, or maybe even a quarter of a story each week, as it kind of released, probably 6 or 7 months behind whatever was being released in America. And the only superhero one that I specifically remember to start off with was it was Spider-Man and Zoids, which is a strange combination, but the bulk of the issue was whatever was going on in the Spider-Man comics at the time. Yeah. And then you get a backup story, which was like obviously off the toy line Zoids. And I must admit, as strange as it is, as we're going to go into the world of superheroes and comic books, I kind of vibed with the Zoids part of it a bit more. But unfortunately, I found on later on in life that it pretty much was just an absolute skank of the movie Terminator. And I found that out when I watched the movie Terminator and went, this is the Zoid story. And someone pointed out, no, Terminator come first, Zoids have just stolen it. And then other than that, the weekly ones was there was some Star Wars reprints and there was some Transformers reprints. So again, my kind of step into buying comics was less superhero-y than it probably sort of turned out, because I only bought what was available, and really that was it. And again, I think that's one of the things about probably the world now, which is dramatically different, is when I was a kid growing up, the superheroes weren't such a big thing. As we said, we had Adam West, we had the Superman movie, and the other one that I really loved, and I know you mentioned sort of the Batman cartoons, but was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. That was a cartoon that I could watch over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it probably hasn't got the greatest storytelling in the world, but again, it was a chance to see these cartoon characters, or at the time, what I thought of as cartoon characters, but now I think of as comic book characters, come to life on the screen. So yeah, there was a bit of a weird transition, and my local video shop for a short period of time had, I think it was Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor video for some of their animated stuff, which I want to say was kind of late 60s, maybe early 70s. So I got like a little dabble with that. But even at that stage, I was kind of forming this secret love for superheroes, like this real desire to see more, but I didn't have an outlet at that stage. I kind of didn't know what was out there and didn't know how to get my hands on it, which, you know, we'll flip back to you for a second, but we'll get back in a little while as to how I did start getting my grubby little mitts on it, because it is a story that has some personal meaning for me, so it is quite nice kind of when we get to that bit. So yeah, I guess, how did you transition into the knowing about comics, the American comics as we think of them as now?
See, for me, it sort of, once I got to sort of like 10, 12, obviously you had the Batman films, the Tim Burton ones, so obviously I knew that sort of stuff, but it sort of died a bit for me, because that's when I really got into music and the football, and I moved away from buying things like the Beano and Dandy and like any of that sort of stuff, because obviously I did get Batmans. that came out around the animated series. But then when it like head into football, and it wasn't really until I think it was the last year of high school, I saw some kid in the breakout room because it was hammering down, so we all stayed in, and he was reading The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
And I was just like, why are you reading? What are you reading now? What are you doing? And I went over and he just sort of went, just have a quick scan through this and see what you think. And at that point, I was like, that's not what I remember.
Yeah.
That's dark. That's different. And that was where I had a sort of couple of years there where I was sort of started reading stuff. I would never buy it, but I'd obviously go into local libraries and stuff and see what they had. Because you could always get some weird and wonderful stuff in there. And that's when I first saw like mangas as well. And I was just like, this ain't the shit that I read as a kid. It was that sort of Wizard of Oz moment of this isn't home.
Well, and there's like you mentioned it there about music, and I think like all this stuff, like music, movies, anything that's kind of in that entertainment world is you do get those transitional moments, don't you, where you see something new or you see what someone else is doing creatively with it, and as you said, you go, this ain't the shit I used to get, and again, it kind of, well, I mean, if it's your vibe, it pulls you in, and they can be kind of some of the real jumping moments. And, like I say about like how I kind of got into the world of buying them. The local news agents that had these weekly Marvels, and it was I grew up in a very small village, so there was no big shops. There was no chance that I was ever going to get exposed to any of this stuff. But I still to this day don't know why, and probably it would have saved me a lot of money over my life, but maybe not quite so much interest. But one I don't know, Friday, let's say it was, I went in there, and the last one account, they knew us well. Like it was those days where your dad used to send you up the shop to buy your cigarettes for him, and I was like 8, but they'd sell me cigarettes because they knew it was for my dad. But I'd gone in there, and the last behind the counter said, "Oh, you buy the comics, as she said." Yep. And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, we've just got a load of new ones in. Do you want them?" And I was like, "What do you mean, do you want them?" And she said, "Well, we don't know whether they'll sell. So if you want, you can take all of them home, decide, have a read of them, decide which ones you like, and then buy which ones you want." And this was Marvel. This was the American Marvels. They started to get it into the news agents. And yeah, bless, they sent me home with like a stack that big. And, I read through all of them, and my eyes were suddenly open to, oh my God, like what are these? And a load of them I'm starting to read, and they're on issue 130 or close to 200 or something like that. And, straight away my mind just kind of went, well, hang on a minute, there's been like 200 issues of this before. What happened before? And I think for probably about 4 or 5 months, that's how they did it. Every week they just let me take everything home, and I got to pick and choose what I read. And I tried to get my brother into it, who's 4 years older, because I thought, well, then we can like half the cost. But he didn't really get into it, bless him. But every now and again, my mum made him buy a couple of issues out of his money so that I could read them as well. So it was. And again, I don't know whether it would have, whether I'd have got the bug quite so much if I hadn't been exposed to so much in such a short period of time. But as I say, like I knew that they were then being released. But still, there was this kind of world inside them where I went, oh, I'll never know all of this other stuff because it's all happened. It's all gone before. And just as a strange aside at this point, one of the things that really captured my attention was the adverts, because they were all adverts for kind of American things. So it would be games that hadn't come out over here. It would be all the video game consoles with their American names rather than their UK names. And you get all of those weird, quirky adverts for like invisibility glasses and stuff like that. So you can see through things. And I don't know, there was just something kind of, and all the sweets and breakfast cereals that, again, you couldn't buy over here. And there was just something, it was introducing me to a whole world of stuff that probably I'd only had any concept of because maybe they'd been in a movie like The Goonies or something like that. I'd heard mention of a certain cereal bar, but all of a sudden they were there. But again, I still had a kind of a very narrow field. Now, bizarrely enough, and I think we'll go through this a bit more as the weeks go on, is that probably made me a bit more of a Marvel boy, because they only had Marvel comics in there. So
Yeah.
they didn't have any DC. So I guess I was getting introduced to all these Marvel characters. But strangely enough, as I said, had grown my love from Batman. And I guess at that point, I still had that disassociation of not really knowing that Batman had comics, because I only saw what I saw. I mean, I'll continue with that, as I say, for about 4 or 5 months. But and this is a nice part of the story, I promise. But one Saturday afternoon, my dad had said to me, "We're going to Colchester for the day," and it wasn't irregular. Like, we'd often go to Colchester to do shopping, and we kind of parked in a different car park than usual. And he walked me towards Colchester Castle, which, you know, like I wasn't really interested in Colchester Castle, so I thought, oh God, this is gonna be a crap day out. And we got to like the which I think was called Castle Walk, the walk up to it, and we're walking up there, and part of town I'd never gone to, and like we were kind of walking, and my dad just stopped, and he just went, "Right, there you go in there. I'll be back in a couple of hours." And it was Ace Comics, and it was an American comic book shop, and I didn't know anything like this existed, but my dad had just dropped me off and basically said, "There's a sweet shop, go in there, yeah, fill your boots," and you know, like that's where, like, I guess my real obsession come in, because I'd seen that these series were up to whatever number, let's say 100, and all of a sudden I got dropped in a shop which had all of Marvel, DC, but also had all the long boxes. And I'm flipping through and going, "Oh my God, that's that story that they referenced. There's that back issue. There's that back issue." And I think probably from then on, for about 3 years, I don't think I spent a Saturday where I didn't go to Colchester to pick up something. And yeah, you know, like it got its hooks in, and it got its hooks in bad. I mean, my mum's loft is primarily taken up by back issues of comic books that I bought back when I was young. But you know, it was a lovely moment, and I just thought, like, yeah, as I say, probably would have saved me quite a bit of money and time if I'd never been taken to that shop. But yeah, I just wouldn't have known it was there. So yeah, I delved in deep from that point. So I know you sort of said about dipping out. Any other notable dip out moments, like, or have you since then kind of kept yourself not necessarily embedded totally in it, but with a kind of dipping in regularly, or yeah.
It was sort of, I did a bit sort of the back end of high school, and then, you know, beer, booze, and, you know, and gigs and stuff took over, and it was sort of, that became more of what I was doing. It wasn't until I had the little one, and we were, as you do with all kids, you get them books that you're going to read to them. And obviously at that point, watching all the Marvel films,
yeah,
because we're now sort of 10 years ago, so obviously the MCU's a thing at that point. And he used to sit there, even when he was really young, and sit there and he would just watch them. I would imagine it's because of like the fact that bright colours and, you know, lots of action and stuff. So we went and bought, like, there's like these books that are like 5-minute Batman stories for bedtime and 5-minute Spider-Man stories and things like that. And at that point I went, I really want to get back into these, but I want this. And that was when I then started buying stuff. But it was daunting as fuck, because you go in, and especially when you've not read anything for 10, 20 years, and it's like, right, where do you start?
And it's a tough question to answer, isn't it? Because where do you start? You're spot on there, yeah.
And so I did, obviously, the obvious thing. I went and bought Killing Joke because I loved it when I was a kid. I was like, I need a proper copy of that. So I went and bought that. And then I was speaking to the guy in the shop, and I was like, right, I want sort of darky, sort of edgy stuff. Batman. Love Batman. So he then sort of gave me The Long Halloween and Hush, and when you might like The Court of Owls. So I started with that, and then from there I then sort of was like speaking to mates that read stuff to try and sort of go, right, I like this and I like this, what's similar? But yeah, sort of during that barren patch when I wasn't reading, I would watch all the films, you know, love me some Spawn, love me some Blade, from back in the day.
Yeah.
And would always buy the superhero games. But it was just one of those I just wouldn't go into the comic book bit. I think it was that apprehension of being like, right, I'm so out of the loop.
Yeah.
Where do you go?
Well, it's and it's not cheap, is it? You know, like, and you almost go, well, if I've got X amount of pounds to lay down on this, I want to have a feeling that I'm going to like what I get at the end of it. Because again, you know, that will destroy it for you. If you went and bought something, it just turned out to be I mean, it's interesting you say about speaking to a guy in the shop. Maybe it just speaks to me more as a person, but I never ever considered that. The amount of times I spent in comic shops, I've never thought about actually asking the person who sells it what might actually be good and what I might like.
Because it was just that sort of thing. I was like, because obviously I went in, I saw that they had, I think it was the 20th anniversary edition of Killing Joke in the hardback. And I was like, that's mine.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, I know I like this one. What's similar? And, you know, it was just like this. And yeah, that was basically when I got back into it. And now I have like a massive bag full of stuff because I haven't got a bookcase to put them on yet. But yeah, the thing is, what I do, you know, you might shoot me down for not being a pure one, but I don't buy individual issues unless it's very, very rarely something that I have to get. So something we'll go on about in episode 2 when we do our top 5s, but the free Jokers, I have to get those as soon as they came out in individual episodes. Batman or the Joker 80th birthday one, I had to get that. But normally what I will do is I will go and spend the big money and buy the complete book. Because then I know at least that way I've got it all. Yeah, I'm behind if I was to, you know, be doing release day stuff. But
yeah,
you've got everything there. And because that's the one thing that I know it's not so much a problem with comic book shops because, you know, majority of the time they will have multiple copies of issues and they stay in post that week or that month's release. But it's that whole thing of if you miss a month, you know, the story technically is ruined because you don't know what happened, which is why I do it the other way and buy the expensive versions when they come out after the run's finished.
Well, I mean, there's something in that, and again, like I guess, like it's something nice to kind of hear in comments for anyone who watches this who is a collector, kind of how you collect. Because, as I said to you, for years it was single issues, like monthly releases. But you know, as I say, I was there every week. I had the pull list, and I would go in and I would get all of mine. And one of the biggest problems that I found ultimately is space. Because they take up a lot of room. And as I say, unfortunately, I don't think I've necessarily done the best by my collection because at some point I moved and then that stuff had to move into my mum's loft because my first flat wasn't big enough to put them in. And subsequent houses technically have been big enough, but I got into the habit of not having to house it in my own house. So they live in my mum's loft. But yeah, I like you. I mean, I moved away from single issues quite a long time ago, and very much like you, and there's some kind of behind us, but I will often buy either the trade, so the soft cover one, if it's something that I don't really know, and I think, well, you know, it's a cheaper entry point to it. But if it's something I love or I think I'm going to love, it's the hardcover all the way. And again, I don't mind, much like yourself, I don't mind that story being finished because the nice thing is when I get it in the hardcover, I can read the whole story in one go. And I got out of that habit of having to kind of know what's happening each month a long time ago, and I'm really pleased I did. But I will say, I do still, and I say I don't buy single issues, I still am prone now, and again, I think we'll probably do an episode on this later, but of getting them digitally because it saves space. Now, cost-wise, there's not a lot in it anymore, and it's not the same. However,
see, that was something I was going to sort of bring up, said as a later one, is I because I'm dyslexic, I can't do digital reading.
Okay.
Because it's one of those of I struggle if like the background colors slightly ajar or something like that. Where in book form it's usually okay, or I can move to a different light where it's easier for me to read. So I did a couple, was it 2 or 3 years ago. It was like Batman Day. They did a load of free issues
Yeah.
digitally, and I think I read about half of one of them just because it was hard for me to read it.
It's strange, I guess, because I've never even thought of it as a concept, and I guess because and we'll circle back round to something else in the origins in a minute, which we'll probably touch on this, but I've never really had anyone to ask about it, so it's never kind of been thrust upon me that actually it might bring difficulties with things like that. As I say, for me, it was a convenience choice of going. Like, my missus is going to kill me if I bring any more stuff in the house. So actually, if I bring it in digitally, I might survive a little bit longer. So yeah, it was a value proposition on that side, and then I could get them in hardcovers later if I enjoyed the story, and then it looks a bit smarter on a bookshelf, so I might not get destroyed quite so handily by her. But
so yeah, that's the thing. It's like, so with me, there's not that. So I know that a lot of them, they will do like a free issue or a cheaper first issue or something like that.
yeah,
Whereas because I can't read them well,
yeah,
I miss out on those sort of things. I'm just like, right, so I'm going in with full back on it.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, I guess to take a step back and to pick up on one of the things I just said about not really having like anyone to kind of ever bounce this stuff off. So, you said about at some point, like, you found like football and music and drinking and things like that. I mean, strangely enough, I was quite a sporty kid. I won't get my arse off the couch now, even for £1,000,000, but I was quite sporty. I played football 4 or 5 days a week. And then when I say I play football 4 or 5, I play football 4 or 5 nights a week and at a weekend. And I'd be playing every lunchtime at school. I was that kid.
Yeah.
And then eventually I found booze, which I really liked. I took to that. That was good. And music. But the comics always stayed with me. But it was my dirty little secret, because I knew no one, and I literally knew no one who liked comics, except for there was a small period, and again, maybe something we'll do in a later show, where there was a boom period for comics, the speculators market, where all of a sudden people thought that they were going to be able to put their kids through school, through university, and buy houses based off of comics, where I had a purple patch of about 2 years there where people I hung around with started talking about comics and started to ostensibly read them. But as I later found out, they kind of bought them and hoped that they would just make a load of money out of them. So,
Yeah.
And again, it was the difference between the medium of reading comics and them being on TV and movies. So if I'd gone into school and said, I went and saw the Batman movie, it was brilliant. Everyone was like, yeah, Batman, brilliant. If I'd gone into school and said, I read a Batman comic, they'd go, comic? What are you, 7?
Yeah.
And so there was kind of always that disconnect. So I never really talked out loud about it. But as I say, my dirty little secret, but it never went away. But I did have dropout points. And there've been a number of times in my life where I've gone from reading loads to nothing. And I don't know whether it's just burnout that caused it, or other interests sort of taking over. And sometimes I think it's the quality of what I'm reading. Like anything, they produce tons of stuff. But unfortunately, when you produce tons of stuff, a lot of that stuff might be crap.
Yeah.
And if you read crap after crap after crap, all of a sudden you go, why am I wasting my time? Why am I wasting my money? So I would say that there have been at least 4 or 5 times in my life where I had very big periods of time where I just stopped. However, I think even though I stopped, there was always a kind of keeping my eye in a little bit. So, once we get to good into that age, I could still maybe find out what was going on in those books, or kept my eye in from that side. And as you say, like, the world we live in today with the way the movies are, a very different world. So I was gagging for stuff like this when I was a kid. I wanted, as I say, I had Richard Donner Superman, which, varying degrees depending on which Superman movie you're watching. We had Burton's Batman, and then the non-Burton Batman, and the animated shows. But it was really sparse. And you said it earlier about Blade, but I think, we get to that period where like movies like Blade start to be snuck out, and there was a little bit in between where you had Nick Fury, no, sorry, Nick Fury, David Hasselhoff. We don't talk about stuff like that. But
the really bad Punisher from then as well.
Oh God, yes. But they were cheaply made, horrible stuff. But I'd still watch them because I wanted that form of entertainment. But yes, I look at young me now. If I was living now, this would have been my age. I'd have been like, brilliant. I'm getting tons of animated seasons, TV shows, movies, and the comic books. But strangely enough, I know we've talked about this on the Renaissance Men podcast a couple of times of saying it is quite strange that there's still this stigma to the comic book side of it, because you can get $1 billion movie, but you can only sell 20,000 copies of the comic. So I think there's still some sort of stigma behind it. But yeah, I mean, it's just hard sell, I think.
Yeah, I think a little bit of the stigma though is, as I said, when I was coming back into it, is where do you start? Because the thing is, the films have very much put it all on a plate for you. That is the story arc, from start to beginning, starting with Iron Man, finishing at Guardians, or at Avengers. There you go. That's a whole story arc. They all play into each other. Whereas if you were to go into a comic book shop now and go, right, I want an Avengers.
Yep. And they go, you can have one of the 15 concurrent series that are currently running with Avengers, but also here are the 800 issues that have previously been published across. I mean, it is a tough transition point. I guess one of the things that I hope, and I do hope, is that that you do get people who pick up the comics though, because they are the places that create all these wonderful stories. And don't get me wrong, great directors, great movie writers, actors come along and I guess refine these products and turn them into something that's very viewable. And as you say, they can come along and they can pick from 30 years worth of stories and they can pick the best bits, tie them all up in a movie series. But yeah, I think it would be a shame, because I think if that kind of comic book print media side of it ever disappears, I just think what fuels those stories, and it was that kind of shaped me. I always say, and again, apologies, because I think this is for any Renaissance Men podcast listeners, but I think this is something I covered in there of going. I wasn't a religious kid. It wasn't it just never vibed with me at all. And kind of my whole moral code was based off of superheroes. It taught me what was good, bad, and I think there really is something in that. I think it teaches us quite simple lessons, and then as you say, as you progress in life and you probably get more complicated as a human being, you then transition into other stories, for example, the Killing Joke and things like that, because there's these great writers telling you stories about the world as it is now, or the world is at the time when they write it, and you find that, and a lot to learn in it. But I guess it's, I said earlier, it's like music, it's like movies. You grow and you kind of find the products that do it. One of the things I know we want to do on here is kind of addressing that. Where do we start? And I think over the weeks, what we're going to try and do is look at jumping in points and stories that maybe meant something to us or that have interested us, so that then we can kind of go, this is the vibe of it, if you like this sort of thing, and again probably transition out of that. And my hope is that someone comes along in the comments and gives us something, maybe something that neither of us have ever experienced, and we can get that kind of all new shiny thing feeling again. Because I need more stuff to spend my money on, as the shit behind me shows.
Yeah, of course. So obviously pretty much gone through where we are up till today. So I think that will do for episode 1. And we'll be back with episode 2, where we will go into our top 5 books, story arcs, issues.
I think story arcs is probably closest to probably what we're going with, isn't it? And just to let you know, Chris, because we haven't discussed this, one of the reasons why I suggested the top 5, I'm a sucker for top fives. I absolutely love top fives in everything in life. So I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the first of many top fives that we get to at certain points in this show.
Well, there's going to be at least a top 5 shit comic films.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yes. I cannot wait for that.
I'm channeling Thor versus Hulk from the 70s. That's a terrible film.
We might have to agree to disagree on that. But yeah, you know, like yeah, I do love a top 5. So yeah, I think we'll kind of trying to make that a bit of a regular occurrence on the show, hopefully.
Cool. So, Seddon was wonderful. Hopefully, everyone has enjoyed this. Again, as Seddon said, obviously, if you've got issues or story runs or
sorry, it made me laugh then, Chris. It's like if you've got any issues, you know, we are also trained psychologists. That's not true. We're not trained the slightest. We're not trained. We're amateurs.
But yeah, no, any sort of recommendations of stuff, obviously chuck them in the comments. That usual YouTube thing of like, subscribe, ring the fucking bell.
Yeah. The thing that I never do on any of the things that I've ever created because I forget every time.
I just get it from my kid who watches all that Fortnite shit on YouTube. It's like, right, ring the bell.
Yeah. And again, like I realise it's the done thing because the idea is that the more you do it, the more chance people might do it. And you know, like for us, this is really nice. We get to talk about something we love. And the kind of hope is that from this, you kind of build that community around it of other people who like it and we can chat to them. But it still feels really uncomfortable, doesn't it? Of going, please like me. But shit, we'll go with it.
We'll do it. So I've been Lacey, he's been Seddon, this has been Comic Book Stash, and we'll be back in episode 2 with the top 5 list.
Thanks for watching, and just remember, you can join the Cult of Egg by liking and subscribing to this YouTube channel. We release regular content where we talk about all things geek, all things pop culture, and all things that we're interested in. You can also come along and join the discussion on Facebook groups and Renaissance Cast. And you can join us on our Twitch channel where Stu regularly streams games. And if you'd like to support us, then please follow the link for the Patreon. Thanks very much.